Hogstye.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Hogstye. It is I, Alex. We have Steve. We have Dave. Guys, I hope you had a good Memorial Day weekend. I know you don't want to say happy. That's never right. So I hope you had a decent Memorial Day weekend for yourselves, since you both served. And I'm
Yeah,
sure
well,
it's
I mean, it's
friends.
about who died. That's what
Yeah,
civilians
exactly.
sometimes don't understand. And I always tell people, don't thank me. Go find a gold star mother and thank her.
Right,
That's what you
exactly.
need to do.
Exactly.
I appreciate the sentiment, but it's not really about those of us who are here. I mean, most of us have, and Dave, you can speak to your own experiences, but even people who didn't serve in like frontline combat units, we have people who have passed in line of service, and I always kind of remember those people on days like Memorial Day.
Sure. We did a great event at my work. We had a guy who used to be very high up and was actually with the last administration, but he came by, did like a whole thing about talking about people he knew who passed, people he had served with, which was an interesting. Like usually when they do these events, that doesn't happen, but it was really it hit you.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, see, I was fortunate in my career path, being an aircraft mechanic like I was, that I didn't really experience or have to handle the loss of a fellow soldier or anything like that. So whenever I went anywhere, it was always at a base, isolated outside, away from where anything was ever going on, because we flew everything there, obviously.
Right.
So, but yeah, it's just, and I share the same sentiment. I tell my mom this all the time. She always says, thank you for your service. I'm like, it's not the weekend to thank me for my service. Although I appreciate it, that's not what this weekend's all about. And so, and I agree with that 100% with that one.
Yeah.
It kind of, I try not to be rude to people, obviously, when they say stuff like that, but honestly, it makes me uncomfortable, because
their
it's like,
intentions
No,
are
I'm
good.
with you on that. Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Yeah.
and people mean it in the good, with good intentions for the most part. So I don't disparage people for it. But yeah, it makes me uncomfortable.
Right. Well, we'll save the actual thanks for Veterans Day, and that.
Did anybody do anything super exciting for the long weekend? How about that?
I was in the
Let's
car
see.
for 11 hours.
Did you go to New York?
Yeah. 11 hours one way.
That's fun.
I'll give you one guess on how I probably spent my weekend on a particular house from one of the worst renters you could have ever had.
Yes, Dave,
what
you don't want to go into that story on the air, probably.
Yes. No, not.
Yeah.
Not
you and I had
great detail.
You and I had a conversation about that.
Yeah, in fact, my carpal tunnel is going crazy because I got done painting the living room and dining room in that house today.
I was intending to go somewhere, but then I spent all of my Let's Go Travel money on a really cool guitar a couple weeks ago, and so that eliminated the Memorial Day trip. So,
well, the guitar will make you happy for a long time,
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't pass it.
Dave, I wasn't cleaning up a disaster house, but I was doing a lot of brush clearing up in the woods. I got eaten alive, man. I've got like 50 bug bites all over my legs. It's gruesome, honestly. A lot of blood.
Have you ever tried those little sonic things you put on your belt when you go out there?
No, I've never tried them on my belt. I use them in my house to keep mice away, though, and they work. So, yeah.
Well, they have one for bugs. I've never tried it. But I see it every now and then pop up.
If you guys can hear anything on my mic out there, it's because there seems to be a helicopter that's continually circling my house out there.
Uh-oh.
I don't know what it is.
What did you do this time, Steve?
The popo are looking for somebody.
I can't see it from the room I'm in. That's why I keep Dave and Alex see me looking out the window.
Yeah.
So we quickly go off the air. The reason is because they got them busting in Steve's house.
Exactly. Yeah. It's either that or it's. We usually have Coast Guard, helicopters around here because we're real near the water, and that's usually what it is. But whatever it is, it's gone around 3 or 4 times now over the past 10 minutes.
Well, as soon as they bust down the door, switch the camera around, and Alex and I will give play-by-play.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go.
So.
And Steve, he's getting tasered.
Because I would certainly be the one they'd come after.
Hey, maybe it's a work emergency of some kind that.
Right.
Oh yeah,
They
that,
send
yeah,
the
certainly.
helicopters.
That's what I mean. The federal,
Yeah.
although I mean, I'm probably the easiest person to find on the face of the earth that's not a public figure. So
Right.
the government even has my DNA on file.
Sure.
I don't know
I
if you
mean,
ever had to do that, Dave. They made us do DNA samples when I was in Special Operations Command.
No, I never had to do that.
the government's technically tracking me all the time just because I have my email on my phone. So.
Well, I have that, and I've got a couple licenses I'm not going to talk about on the air
Right.
that, they track me like that, and,
Right.
I work for the government like you do.
Yeah. Look, they're tracking all of us. Even like the
Right.
homeless dude is being tracked. So let's
Someday
just
I'm going to live totally off the grid, completely just under, out in the woods.
Dave, if you need, or Steve, if you need a cabin in the woods, I got one for you. You can
It's
crash
New York,
there.
though. I wouldn't curse myself by having to go to the state of New York.
Especially in the winter, it's not fun up there.
I just don't like the people in New York.
Oh, dude, that's like rural New York. It's very.
I'm still subjected to New York law, though.
That is true.
I'd rather go to like Idaho, that's too cold. I mean, I don't know. I'd probably stay in Texas and just go out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, you just got to find like the one cabin in the woods in Texas.
Exactly. I have to find the woods, period, in Texas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm hoping your cabin in the wood isn't something that had the sacrifices in the basement to appease the gods, right?
Oh yeah, none of that. None of that.
Okay.
Good movie though.
Yes,
Great
it
movie.
was.
Yeah.
Alex's real last name is Kaczynski.
Not that far off, also Jewish sounding.
There's the helicopter again, by the way.
It's not getting picked up by your mic.
Okay, well, good. If you hear a pounding on the door, that'll almost certainly get picked up by the mic.
Yeah. All right. I guess we've got to talk a little bit about the goings on with the team at training camp.
It's not training
weird.
camp.
When we were prepping, I realized this is the first time in a while we haven't had like a off the field story. Because
I know, it's disappointing. I love the off field stories.
Brian Davis needs to like run around the Washington Monument with no pants on or something. I don't know.
I think he's already done that.
If
if you want to hear a whole diatribe, we did, 25 minutes. Chris Leary and I did on IJB to dive deep into that crazy lawsuit. So you can go listen to that.
It's worth a listen, guys. I was listening to it today. It's a good one.
It's off the deep end, man. It really is. We did some more investigation into the crazy stolen gold story.
Yeah, that you and I just brushed on earlier.
Yeah. And of course, I think we can have credit on the show being the first to actually break that and talk about that. It wasn't like a couple of days after that you started getting ESPN 980 and all of them starting to talk about it.
As far as I know, I mean, maybe someone else did. I don't know, but not that we noticed.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we might have tied the front office sports guys at the worst because I feel like we posted our show and they were talking about it at the same time.
The front office sports guys said it was a $500 billion lawsuit, though. So
the other guy at front office sports, that's who I'm talking about. Right. There's two guys.
Okay.
But they're both named like Dan or something. It's very confusing.
Point is, go listen to that because it was a good one.
Yeah, it's a great show. Worth a listen for that topic alone. All right, so here's some stories that Dave and I picked up on looking at what's going on at training camp. Interesting story number one. Shouldn't surprise anybody that Emmanuel Forbes is kind of a key focal point for the whole team. He's the number one pick. People are saying he's playing really well, though, in training camp. Now, how much of this is you have basically a rookie quarterback in Sam Howell throwing most of the passes, and how much of this is Forbes is just going to be as good as advertised? That's going to be the wild card.
I mean, he's probably a man among boys in terms of a bunch of rookies and, but it's not, it's OTAs, by the way. You keep saying training camp.
Sorry, you're right.
Yeah.
OTAs.
Well, look, he's a first round pick. Hopefully he can play.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully he's good. What amazes me is my one foray into Twitter, which would be 2 hours ago in preparation for this show. It appears to me as though Washington has been playing Kendall Fuller on the outside and putting Benjamin St. Juste in the inside. And that, my friends, is freaking dumb. Okay?
Yeah, I don't know.
I had newsflash to Ron Rivera and company. Kendall Fuller needs to be a slot corner, and Benjamin St. Juste needs to be the outside corner. And what you people are thinking, that's dumb as hell.
The only reasoning I could see maybe you switch that up from time to time.
Oh, it's money. That's the reason.
I mean, I know money's a big part of it. I mean, first off, the money thing though, at the same time, you could have Fuller playing on the outside a lot and then kick him inside when you need him as a third guy. So he'd basically play every down. My big thing would honestly be, I'm wondering if they look at Benjamin St. Juste and just say, well, he's bigger physically, and we don't have linebackers, so we need to put a bigger corner to kind of make up for a linebacker. And maybe that's their logic.
No, I mean
it's stupid, but that's
they have the they're already kind of playing a
hybrid.
But that's not that's more like the safety's role. That's not, the corner has to drop into zone coverage.
Sure.
I think it's just, the stupidity of these coaches never ceases to amaze me sometimes.
Look, I would be putting Fuller in the slot too most of the time if I were them.
I definitely think Forbes needs to be on the outside. You need to start him. He's a first round draft pick. You need to start him. He needs to be on the outside.
He needs to be he needs to be on the outside and playing the smaller, speedy receivers. That's what I would be doing with him primarily.
Well, from what I understand right now, they've been moving all four of them, both St. Juste and Fuller with who's our second round rookie? What's his name?
Martin.
The safety.
Yes.
Dotavius Martin.
Yeah, him and Forbes. They've been cycling them around like crazy to stay feel for what they could do at each position. It hasn't been a situation where it's been Fuller or Forbes full time on the inside, because he's been out against McLaurin plenty of times on the outside. St. Juste has been kicked inside, and they've had the pairing of both St. Juste and Forbes on the outside, and Fuller has stepped into the slot role. Right now, they're just kind of rotating around to see where that comfort zone is for all of them. And to be honest with you, I agree with you, Steve. If the final result is Forbes to the inside and Fuller to the outside, I'm sorry, that's just a mistake. Fuller has always been a more effective slot corner. And for what Forbes can do in terms of, because one of the biggest raves about him is just his instincts. And he's going to fly around the field. He's going to look great. He's in shorts. Everybody's in shorts. Everyone looks great in shorts, whatever. But that one aspect of him that I keep reading is just how his instincts for the play, how it develops, the routes that the receivers are running, he's beginning to recognize a little bit better. And his first step, once he makes a play on the ball, is so far has been as advertised. He has been quick with that first step and getting right in front of coverage. He's had real good man-to-man coverage on McLaurin many times so far from what I've read. Granted, yes, it's in shorts. I don't get overly impressed by in terms of how these guys fly around the field and what they do, but it's just the instincts there. Will he keep carrying that? Is that right there is what I'm going to watch, because I'll be curious to know if that's really what he's going to be like, because of course that reminds you or us from another undersized corner back in the heyday of a guy who used to recognize and read a quarterback and route recognition perfectly ever since his rookie year in Darrell Green. He's not Darrell Green, I know that, but it's just we haven't had a corner come in here and play to that type of level in terms of recognition right off the bat. That's usually development over a period of time. Even Benjamin St. Juste never had never had praise like that in his rookie year.
You make a good point, which is, we're really early in the season preparations, and if anybody's ever played football knows in early days, the secondary and the wide receiver coaches kind of line whoever up against whoever, and you just go out there and kind of play. So hopefully it's that, hopefully the coaches will ultimately be smart enough to ignore who's making the most money and play the people where they actually supposed to go. Where's the most effective use of their talent? Now, they've not done it before. See Davis, Jamin. It took them a year to figure that out. And Washington kind of has a history before this coaching staff of misusing, defensive backs in the wrong spot and everything. So hopefully this is just early and you guys are right and, it'll work out. We'll see. It's too early to know.
Situationally, let's be honest, no matter what, they're all going to have to play inside and outside at various times, just depending on matchups and things like that. I could easily see situations where it makes sense for Forbes to be on the slot guy if the top target for whoever we're playing each week is the slot receiver and the matchup makes sense, go for it, right? Like that's what you don't just say, well, he's playing here because he always plays here. That's how you get into the Josh Norman problem that we had. I think that puts you at a disadvantage if a guy's only ever going to play one half the field on the outside every time. Makes you predictable.
Now you bring up Jamin Davis, which is a great point. Now my question is, how much of it is in the beginning Ron Rivera just being steadfast in his decision and stubborn and not allowing Jack Del Rio to make the proper changes, as opposed to Jack Del Rio not having the ability to make the change? Because if you notice, once Jack Del Rio got his hands on Jamin Davis and motivated him in a way that most fans didn't like, but it seemed to have worked, and he started utilizing Jamin Davis the way that he needed to be utilized, you saw progression. You saw a better linebacker, as opposed to the force-fed middle linebacker that Ron Rivera wanted. Now, if that's the case, maybe he allows Jack Del Rio the freedom to say, hey, listen, I need Fuller to the inside. I got to have Forbes to the outside with St. Juice. That's my best combo. Because Jack Del Rio, the one thing that he has always done, he's always put in, no matter where he's been, whatever defenses he run, he's always coached to his players' strengths and where they're best to line up. But don't forget, Ron Rivera has the ultimate decision. And if he keeps putting them shackles on Jack Del Rio, then you might have a Jamin Davis repeat all over again.
I don't know. I mean, maybe both of them are stubborn. I don't know. Certainly Ron Rivera is stubborn. There's no doubt about it. I mean, we're not there. We don't know. I tend to blame Ron Rivera just because he's the head coach.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree.
But I would, if I had to venture a guess, I'd probably say you're right. But it's kind of hard to see if we're not really there and in the building and all of that. Because at the end of the day, I mean, Del Rio's the defensive coordinator. Did Ron Rivera really say thou shalt play Jamin Davis as the middle linebacker? I mean, I don't know. Did it happen? I wouldn't put it past him. If I had to take a stab at it, I'd say you're probably right, but I don't know if we'll ever really know.
No, probably not. I mean, unless we get on Hard Knocks, then we'll know some stuff.
Well, the last thing Washington needs to be is on Hard Knocks.
The last thing any team needs to be is on Hard Knocks.
But especially a team that has been as much of a train wreck as Washington has.
That's why Hard Knocks. I'm surprised Hard Knocks hasn't wanted them.
Well, no, the reason why Hard Knocks never wanted Washington is has one of the smallest fan bases in the NFL. Okay, they want ratings.
No, I understand
And when
that.
5 people go to games, they don't want that team.
I mean, well, they did the Detroit Lions last year. I mean,
well, even the Lions draw better than Washington.
They were the 31st team, not the 32nd. I know.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. And so, I mean, but they ever had. There's a reason why Dallas keeps appearing on Hard Knocks. The Rams.
I get that. I'm not debating that one.
But I think when you are recovering from, it's like when you've suffered trauma. Sometimes, like if you have PTSD, you saw a car wreck, saw something horrible happen. Sometimes you don't want to be out in that. You want to just recover and sit alone in your house for a while and just get over it, and that's kind of where I think Washington fans are and the team is when you're getting over some severe trauma. Because like having Dan Snyder as an owner is the equivalent of seeing somebody get run over by a car in the street, right? Yes. And so you just want to recover and get mentally right. And you don't need to do that on national television. Just let the team get better, become a professional organization. Let Josh Harris, by the way, the story, not to deviate, but the story is that the NFL doesn't like Harris's financing after all, if you saw this.
Yeah, we saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
that, didn't we?
No, we didn't talk about that. I mean, the NFL has serious questions, I think, more than they did about the financing. So I don't know.
Specifically, the $1 billion that is that's basically not backed by anything. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and so they're calling it equity, but it's really not their money, and so they look at it as kind of unsecured debt. That's the problem. So point is, if Josh here, and we didn't plan for that topic, but I just wanted to bring that up. One thing about it. But point is, I think the team needs to just get better.
Sure.
Get over it and do Hard Knocks next year. That would be my vote.
All right. So some other things going on at camp, just because we have a lot of little things we wanted to mention. Dave, you said you saw something about Cole Turner possibly beating out Logan Thomas for the TE1 job, which is interesting.
The one thing that I've noticed, just on, some of the reporters speaking to Cole Turner and the article, a little smidgen in there, but I shared with you guys, is that the one thing that Cole Turner seems to be doing, or his ability in terms of his size, speed, and what he can do underneath, has been so far. And granted, again, they're all in shorts and shirts, whatever, but he's been the ideal player for that tight end position that Bieniemy really, really has been looking at it, focusing on, which is more so than Logan Thomas or anybody else in that roster. So he's been taking these opportunities, and so far he seems to be, because when he came out of college, it was never an issue with his hands. He had good, reliable hands. He was a very quick, decent route runner. I mean, he would limit to like 3 or 4 routes, but you don't ask your tight ends to do much anyway in terms of routes anyway, unless you're Kelsey, he does everything. But and he is a great red zone target. He's a great short yardage target because of his frame and his body and how he high points the ball. I mean, as a receiver, there was never any issue about him as a receiver. As always, he was rolling his routes and everything. And apparently he's honed that. He's actually expanded his route tree more this year, and he's doing more. Now, granted, he's always going to be a liability in the blocking side of it, but I mean, we don't have anybody except for Bates maybe that can block as a tight end anyways on this roster. But so.
Yeah.
I mean, look, somebody has to start at tight end, right?
Yeah.
They didn't draft anybody. They didn't sign anybody. They ignored it. And Turner is the guy that they drafted, and they obviously like him. And almost by default, somebody has to be the guy.
Yep.
And if it's not going to be Logan Thomas, or Logan Thomas is getting old or whatever, or maybe never, maybe he's never going to get back his form. I mean, Cole, they spent a 5th round draft pick on Cole Turner.
Yeah.
They like to make use. They spent a 4th round draft pick on John Bates, but he's not known as like you said, Dave. I mean, he's not known as like the receiver that Turner is.
Right.
And so if you're trying to improve the effectiveness of your offense, I mean, you want some combination of the blocker and the pass catcher, certainly, but you more want the pass catcher in today's NFL.
Yes.
So maybe the tight end people really they have. It's kind of like, the old classic rock song, if you don't have the one you love the one you with, I mean, that's kind of where we are with the tight end group here.
Yeah.
And if you can't be with the one you love the one you with. That's the lyric.
There you go.
Yeah.
And the only problem, though, because you bring a good point, though, with the blocking wise, is that if this offensive line doesn't take any significant step forward, Cole Turner becomes that much more of a liability as a start, as a tight end 1. I mean, you're almost forced to have to play Bates, or if Logan Thomas is ready, more often. Now, you prefer Logan Thomas more so over Bates, but Bates is our best blocking tight end.
Yeah, I don't know how great a blocker Logan Thomas really is.
He never was anything special now.
He gets in the way effectively is what he does. He won't hold a block, but he just gets in the way effectively.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not saying much, but at least he does something.
Yeah. All right. So 2 more camp tidbits. One, I'll just mention Clinton Portis. There was a Clinton Portis sighting at camp, which means I guess his legal issues are behind him because
jailbreak.
Yeah. I don't think that happened. Maybe Dan.
They put an old Thin Lizzy song, Jailbreak. I have a source that came to me and said Clinton Portis broke out of jail, escaped.
Shawshank Redemption style.
The Hog Stye exclusive.
Did he go through 500 yards of
Sewage?
sewage?
Yes.
I mean, he just looked at Dan Snyder the whole 500 yards. That was the sewage.
That may or may not be true, people.
Dan
Decide for
Snyder
yourself.
like busted through the wall. All right, you can come with me.
So Clinton, if those of you recall, ran an insurance fraud scam,
Right. Got in
and
trouble.
there was something that I forget the name of it. It was the something fund, and what the fund was a fund set aside by the NFL to allow players to apply for aid when they need medical equipment as a result of their football injuries that isn't otherwise covered by
Right.
standard insurance. And so these guys, because they're geniuses, were submitting things that were like meant for women and meant for like animals, and because and like I think it was Cigna, was administering the fund on behalf of the NFL, and because again they're geniuses, they didn't realize that it's companies like Cigna employ armies of auditors designed to prevent insurance fraud.
Right.
You
Say,
know.
why did you need a $55,000 pap smear?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Stuff. I don't know if it was literally Pat, but yeah, stuff
No,
like
no.
that. And yeah.
I
And
was picking something obvious. That's all.
yeah, like Robert McCune, who was a former Washington linebacker for 5 minutes, was actually the ringleader.
Right.
And then Portis was kind of a big name, but he was not involved. Like McCune was involved in all of it, and Portis was involved in some of it.
Right.
But apparently he's out now.
Yeah. So he was at training camp and talking to the running backs. Happy to see. Hopefully his troubles are behind him, because I think we all have a weird soft spot for Clinton Portis just because he was always that goofy, funny. He was a John Riggins on a terrible team, but
I always liked him as a football player.
Yeah.
I mean, as a dude, I don't know any of them. If you don't know them, you don't really know what they're like. But I really greatly appreciated him as a Redskins running back. Yes.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
Tremendously talented. The sheriff gonna get you stuff was always fun to see. It might not be for everybody.
Well, I saw an interview with Portis a while ago on YouTube somewhere, and he said I can't remember the source. I'm sorry, whoever it was, but I can't remember. But it was I do know what it was. It was a podcast by another former NFL player. I can't remember, but anyway, he said that stuff he never really meant it to go on and on. He just kind of did it for fun to entertain people, and then like his teammates started telling him, hey, the media's out there, you got to do it again and again and again, and it kind of just blew up into something you didn't really intend.
That's what happens when you have a good bit. Sometimes that happens. I don't know.
I thought it was a great bit. I love it.
But he was smart enough not to keep doing it, because like Hollywood will make 12 different Fast and Furious movies when they should have stopped at 7, just as an example. Or like they should have stopped at like the 20th superhero movie and said they're up to like the 500th.
Yeah, sure.
But Portis was smart enough to know that it needs to end.
They did it for one season.
For 1 year, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but he only did it for like 5 or 6 weeks, and that was it.
Yeah. Well, it was a 5 or 6 game win streak, and then they stopped. And so they stopped doing it.
Then of course he ran an insurance fraud scam, and
he also lost all his money to that other guy. Yeah.
Well, a guy like Portis is kind of an example of what not to do. I mean,
respects, yes.
You made a fortune in the NFL, albeit not as much of a fortune as you would today, and you could have lived comfortably for the rest of your life, and now you don't have any of it. And so what do you do? Now what he's doing is probably living on his NFL retirement, which is no doubt good money, but he's not living like a king like he could have if he had invested properly. And not gone to prison and all that stuff, of course.
Well, and let's be clear, he did invest. He just turned out to be with like a pyramid scheme.
I'm not talking about some shady dude on the corner. He should have like put it in like a 401k or a mutual fund, or
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
All right. So the last interesting thing we saw from camp, there was a story in the Post from Nikki Javala yesterday on the 31st. That Sam Howell, one of the things they're doing with him is the coaches have him wearing a microphone at all times while in camp, just so they can see how he's handling things like the huddle, what he's saying when he's talking to players on the sideline, like how's his leadership skills, which I think is an interesting thing to do with a young quarterback. I'm assuming this stuff is not going to be made public, or maybe
I would hope not.
Little thing.
No way.
Yeah. But it's just an interesting alternative way to coach. And Andy Reid was famous for this. Dave, living in Philly, Andy Reid was always coming up with new things to do, especially with quarterbacks, to help them improve. I remember way back when he had Donovan McNabb wearing sunglasses that like shuttered on him, so that to prevent him from seeing the field at times, just to see how his mental acuity would be throwing the ball and predicting the spots and stuff like that.
Right.
It's a decent idea. It's a pretty good idea. I like it.
Yeah.
Well, see, this is one of actually many examples with Bieniemy in charge of the offensive side.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually see grown-ups running some facet of OTAs and this offseason and everything, because everything Bieniemy is doing is, that right there in terms of, he shares with Sam Howell, so he can tell him like what your issues are in communication and everything. In fact, even one comment that in Sam Howell's interview today was, or yesterday, whichever it was, talking about, when he went over all that, Bieniemy has said, give as much information as possible to make sure you explain everything that needs to be done in that huddle.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, don't hold back, basically.
Yeah.
So it's like, and the one thing that Bieniemy has done, and there's been some players you could tell kind of wearing on him, but most players have been really liking it, is the fact that he's holding everyone accountable. And that's the one thing he's been doing with Sam Howell from day one. And so far, it looks like Sam Howell has been really reacting very well to all that hard coaching. Now, he says that he enjoys it. He wants it. He talks, he wants more of it. I mean, whether that's lip service or true, whatever, you'll
he's got to
find out.
say it, even if he doesn't like it. He's got to say it. Yeah.
Right.
He doesn't have the clout to not say it.
I have a pop quiz.
But,
yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is not for Alex to answer. It's only for Dave to answer. Spell Bieniemy.
Bieniemy?
Yes.
Let me guess, because I keep misspelling it in my
You have misspelled Eric Bieniemy 200 times in all these every week. I see Bieniemy. There are 2 I's in the word Bieniemy, just for the record. I just want you to know that, so I don't have to keep changing it every single week. Eric Bieniemy, Eric Bieniemy, Eric Bieniemy, Eric Bieniemy. Just want you to know that, okay?
Okay. All right, I got you.
No,
that's why
so
most
no
people
more
just write
Eric Bieniemy. There you go. I said I watched all my problems. Steve doesn't like me using initial stuff like that. Spell it. I can't even use QB. He says no.
No, you got to spell it out. Quarterback.
Spell it out.
We do it right here in Hogsty, okay?
Yeah.
No, and I'm fine with that. That's cool. I got no problem with it. Just I promise you from day one that I'd never be a grammatic or spelling with.
Well, clearly you succeeded with the spelling part. Let me tell you, okay?
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm
Dave
just
and I
kidding.
Always room to grow.
Yeah, I'm just obviously kidding around, but
cool.
But Sam Howell, obviously it's way too early to see if the guys succeed or not. I mean, sure. I'm glad to see for his sake that there's good reports about him. We don't get a report that he's a train wreck. I do think that Eric Bieniemy, no matter what you think, I mean, should he be a head coach? Should he not be a head coach? I mean, it looks like he's got, and you've shown this, Dave, that he's got a more of a calculated offensive philosophy. It doesn't always stay the same every year. Mm-hmm. He's pretty good. Like Joe Gibbs was a master at this, adjusting to the talent he has. Eric Bieniemy seems to be able to do that. And so is it good news for Sam Howell? I mean, what we've shown actually Dave showed this. What was the number? 37%, I think was the number. Mm-hmm. So if you read Dave's column this week, the Burgundy and Gold reaction, the second half of it is about the history of Washington's quarterbacks selected in the draft and how successful they've been. The later picks, and it came down to like 37% of them made something of themselves. Yes. And so if you go by that, Howell would have about that much. But I think Eric Bieniemy seems to be a better coach at this early stage, and so maybe there's more hope than that. Yeah. I guess that would be our hope.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of buzz about how different things are with Bieniemy. Dave, you sent something to us earlier how JP Finley from 106.7 was saying
Yes.
how it really seems like Rivera is letting Bieniemy control everything at this point, and Rivera's standing back and watching. And I'm that topic is a much broader topic of, is this some secret plan of succession here? And
no, I mean, Ron's not trying to get himself fired.
No, like Ron would become team president under the new ownership.
He has no say in that whatsoever.
No, I know.
Ron Rivera will never be the team president. He's not. He's a football guy. The team president needs to be a business guy. Ron is a football coach, so he's never going to be the team president. You could maybe see him like graduate to be like just the GM maybe someday, maybe not even in Washington. But he seems to kind of have a Joe Gibbs vibe around him a little bit, and like you've hired a bunch of very senior people.
Yeah.
Like Jack Del Rio's a head coach.
Joe did that, especially his second go round.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The second go round, like Joe Gibbs too, and that's kind of what Ron is emulating here a little bit, I'd say.
Yeah.
But it's too early to see if Bieniemy is going to succeed. Maybe it doesn't work. I mean, I think we have to see.
Yeah, we got a long way to go till we'll know. We might not even know by the end of 1 year, because sometimes it takes coaches a year or two.
Ron's going to be gone if Ron does not succeed this year.
No,
I'm convinced.
Yeah, true.
His contract's coming up. He's going to be a lame duck. Is this year 3 with him?
Year 4.
So he is he's already a lame duck.
Yep.
I mean, unless he makes a deep playoff run, I think he's out of here anyway.
Yeah, with new ownership and all of that, they're going to want to bring in their own people. Yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
If he succeeds, wins the division, everything, maybe you give him a shot. We'll see. But
some roster news. The big story, of course, Cam Dantzler was released. He was one of the few offseason signings the team made.
Man.
Yeah.
Thank you for your 5 minutes of service.
Yep. The other one, this will make no one who cares about offensive line play unhappy. Andrew Norwell on the PUP list, likely going to be cut once his physical and all that stuff's done, is what they're saying.
Yeah.
So Norwell was a big old disappointment, I think, last year. We can all agree.
That's another
He got a little better, but he was just awful for half.
Quick, name Washington's 2 starting guards.
Question mark and
Chris Paul and Samuel
face?
Cosme.
Does that?
Yeah, it's good. I think Cosme's right. Cosme will be one for sure.
Does that bring a warm, fuzzy feeling to anybody?
Should it?
No.
Yeah.
Should not.
What about fuzzy but not warm, like cold fuzzy feelings?
Just a fuzzy feeling.
And
uncomfortable fuzzy.
And
feeling.
I really hope that week 10, people are sitting there and making comments to us, going, "It's like, see how wrong you were about this offensive line. Look how great they are."
Yeah.
I hope
when you have my level of narcissism, I will never admit it.
Yeah,
but look,
Steve will never admit he's wrong. He never has, for on some really basic things that he's been wrong about.
I've not been wrong. Andrew Norwell is a guy they probably never should have signed in the first place. I mean, good riddance to him. He was never very good. None of these linemen that Rivera's brought in have been worth a tinker's damn for the most part. I mean, Charles Leno's been average. Maybe.
Yes.
I don't have any. I think really and truly, there's 2 keys to the season for Washington. One is whether Sam Howell can impersonate a legitimate starting quarterback. We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is offensive line. If the offensive line is hot garbage again, none of this matters.
Yeah.
Simple as that. And I don't know why. It's like a mystery to me why Ron Rivera would not want to bring in some talent, more talent than he did. And to bring the only person you really brought in are centers. Like you brought in Nick Gates and then you drafted another center. I don't understand that. I just don't.
And by the way, I think I heard that he's saying Gates is more of a project than
that. He spent $16.5 million on a project. That makes.
Or I'm sorry, not Gates. The guy they drafted, not Gates.
Stromberg.
Yeah, Stromberg.
Yeah.
And yet you spend a 3rd round pick. Wasn't he a 3rd round pick?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was, because my problem with the pick wasn't you drafted a center. It was you drafted a center in a position that you hope to have somebody starting on with, and yet you
Right.
just signed a guy for
Yep.
$16 million, $16.5 million. I just don't understand at all Washington's offensive line strategy in any capacity.
Yeah, me neither. All right, so we got to do our
after
defensive
3
end
years,
break.
I gave up trying to figure it out anyway.
That's smart.
Yeah. We got to do our defensive end breakdown.
Yes, sir.
You know, as we're going through the position groups, this is what we have going this week. Is the thing up yet, Steve, or it's going up
No, it'll
Friday?
be up Friday. Yeah.
Okay.
We
All
ran
right,
out of
so
time this week.
defensive ends, I don't think there's any surprise for this year. Montez Sweat and Chase Young are going to be the starters, right? Like, you can put that in pen at this point.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no doubt.
Long term, you could very well see neither of them here next year.
You could. Well,
Because-
okay, let's do this.
Yeah.
The person who's gone, for those of you who don't remember, is Shaka Toney,
Right.
who got busted gambling. So he's on a
Right.
1-year gambling suspension.
So he's done.
Yeah, and whether or not he comes back in 2024, I mean, certainly can't count on that. And so then they added KJ Henry in the 5th round of the draft. They added Andre Jones in the 7th round of the draft. And then they signed a guy named Joshua Pryor, who's an undrafted free agent. And then they signed F.A. Obata also. So the total defensive end group consists of, in alphabetical order, William Bradley King,
Mm-hmm.
F.A. Obata, Montez Sweat, or James Smith Williams, Montez Sweat, Casey Toohill, Daniel Wise, and Chase Young. That's the group. And so obviously you're right, Alex. I mean, clearly Young and Sweat are the starters, no question about it.
Right.
And I think James Smith Williams is the principal backup. Doesn't that have to be the case?
I mean, him and Obata both played pretty well. And even Toohill had some good, when he was filling in, when Young was out. The wild card really to me about those three, the guys who were the backups last year, I think they're all here on a 1-year deal too, right, Steve?
Oh yeah, yeah. Sorry, let me pull up my chart here. Okay,
Yeah. I
so
think,
most of these guys are on a 1-year deal. Yes.
Yeah.
The only people in the entire
group,
defensive line group period, who are signed past 2023, to include the tackles, but beyond the draft picks this year, Fedarian Mathis, 2025. Deron Payne just signed the new deal. John Allen signed the new deal, and Ridgeway, John Ridgeway, who's a backup at best. So the guys who are all question marks this year: Young, Toohill, Sweat, Smith Williams, Bradley King. All of these guys are on 1-year deals, so it's a big year, I think. But my question to you guys is, I mean, it kind of has to begin and end with Chase Young. Is Chase Young going to develop into what they hoped he would be?
I'd say odds are no.
That's a tough question because the talent's there, but he, just like we talked about before, he reminds me so much of LeVar Arrington, man. He just doesn't play within the scheme he's being asked to play within. And
yeah. I tend to agree with you. I also wonder, I think I might have said this last week, I wonder how much he really likes playing football. It seems to me he's a guy who loves being a football player, but he might not like being a football player. You know what I mean? I mean,
Sure.
like he kind of is psyched to be Chase Young, NFL star, but I don't know if he's that passionate about actually playing the game. Obviously, he would say he is. I'm not even, but in reality, I mean, is he really I mean, the skip in the OTA thing, again, that bothers me a lot. I mean, you're supposed to be a defensive leader. You're making a fortune. What is so important that you don't have to, you feel the need to skip OTAs? What is so important to you?
Here's the thing. You've made, and you both have said that he reminds you of LeVar Arrington thing. To me, he's always reminded me more of Robert Griffin, where I think his attention is towards being the personality. And
that's a good point too. Yeah.
Because LeVar, for all his flaws on the field, he was a 3-time Pro Bowler. Mm-hmm. I think he did put the effort in.
Griffin was a Pro Bowler too, for the record.
For 1 year. He was an MVP his rookie year. What was Chase Young? MVP his rookie year. Then he got hurt, and everything fell apart very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
We are seeing the exact same thing happen.
Maybe
Now,
some
hopefully-
like mixture of the two, perhaps.
So,
He doesn't
in
have
some
like
ways, yeah.
Robert Griffin had a lot of narcissism.
Yeah, I don't
And
think Chase has that.
no, I don't
No,
either.
no, I don't
But
think so either.
I don't know if anyone could have Griffin's level of narcissism.
it still exists today.
Oh yeah,
Oh man,
He's
unbelievable.
pretty good college football analyst, though. Really, in all honesty.
He's just a good analyst overall. I enjoy listening to him. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I'm not about anything other than his football analysis, though.
Yeah, and he's had a bunch
Correct.
of personal issues I don't really care for, and all
Yeah.
that too. But that's neither here nor there. But yeah, I think my view of it is, I guess in terms of Chase, kind of like what you guys said. I think the odds are against him at this point. I really do. He's gonna have to come out and just dominate this year. Having said that, it looked like Deron Payne was kind of going down the road of average too, and he came back and got himself a contract. So you could
Absolutely
see it
true.
happen. Could happen. I just kind of doubt it. I don't know. I don't get the sense. I always got the sense that Deron could play, but he was kind of stuck in the middle, and that's like this, almost like interior defensive tackle role. You don't get a lot of attention, and you don't see him, you don't hear from him.
Yeah.
Chase, that is not Chase Young. And the simple fact of the matter is, I think the defense is better with James Smith-Williams out there than Chase.
I mean, they played very well with guys who were limited.
If you will compare like dollar value of the two players, Smith-Williams is way off the charts better than Chase Young in that that measure.
Well, see, the one thing I noticed that when you have Sweat and Chase Young out there, they're both kind of like finesse edge rushers, guys that try to use a move or two and try to do what they can and try to get to the quarterback in many different ways. And when you have both ends doing the exact same thing, you tend to leave openings on a defense on both sides far too many times. Where when you had Smith-Williams in there, he was just your traditional bull rushing end that come right in and crash out. It allowed Sweat to do what he did. It was the same thing, back in the day when you talked about Dexter Manley and Charles Mann. Dexter Manley was a guy who sat there and wanted to try to do these moves, come to the inside, or do whatever he had to do, and with all these different techniques and everything. For Charles Mann, he just simply I'm going right through you. That's all I'm doing. You're not going to stop me.
Of course, the difference is that it worked for Manley and Mann.
Absolutely.
Because Dexter Manley just snorted his way out of the NFL. He would have been in the Hall of Fame if he could have kept it up.
Absolutely.
It's an interesting thought, though, Dave, because I had not thought of that myself.
It's good. Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, because the ends have to complement themselves. And the way you complement is that the one end, whatever his weaknesses is, not that it's really not that the weakness is a bad weakness, but whatever it is, your other side needs to complement that to be able to. So
I met somebody who knows Dexter Manley out here, because Dexter Manley is from Houston, and this was like 10 years ago, before we had the show, and the guy, I'm not gonna say his name or anything, but it's kind of funny because the guy was a train wreck too. It's like, no wonder you know Manley. You act exactly like him. And he wore this really garish clothing and stuff, exactly like Dexter did. But I was always trying to, I spent a long time after we started the Hawks, I tried to remember who that guy was, how to get a hold of him. Can you connect me with him? And it never really worked out. But,
that's too bad.
Yeah.
I mean, but it is an interesting thought that why do you have two ends who are basically the same style of rusher?
Right.
I don't have a good answer for it, but it is an interesting point.
I think you're giving them too much credit if you think that was like a strategy. I think they just drafted two defensive ends they liked, and it's not any more complicated than that.
Oh no, that's exactly what they did. But unfortunately, the two guys are almost kind of exactly the same type of player.
Yeah. I actually kind of think Sweat is more in the pocket, if you will, than is Young, though. I mean,
Sweat puts up pretty consistent, not elite numbers, but consistent numbers. And because looking at his 4 years, 7 sacks, 9 sacks, 5 sacks, 8 sacks, and the 5-sack season he missed half the season.
But also, like, Chase disappears into the nether regions for long periods of time, and Sweat always kind of makes an impact, here and there.
He's usually always
he
around
makes
the
2 or 3
quarterback.
good plays a
Yeah.
game. Yeah.
But Chase Young, he just is just not there. You know, he might as well not be on the field.
That's why I've always
Sometimes.
been more of a Montez Sweat guy than a Chase Young guy anyway.
Mm.
You know, and I might be on an island by myself on that one, or very few people, but
It
I'd
was
much
you and
rather
me
keep.
both. I mean, I remember when they drafted him, I kept saying he's not a generous little talent.
Right.
Don't stop saying it, and nobody believed me.
Yeah. I mean, here's my thing looking at these two guys in the season. Let's say Montez Sweat has another season very average, like, in this 8 to 9 sack or 7 to 9 sack range, 8 sacks. Do you try and make more of an effort to sign an average to above average guy like that? Because that's not elite, but those aren't bad numbers. Do you try and keep him versus Chase Young? Who knows how he's like? Even if he has a good year, who knows if he'll be consistent? To me, I feel like if you told me Montez Sweat's going to be 8 sacks for a 10-year career, I would believe it. Right? I don't know if I'd buy Chase Young even if he has a good season right now.
I mean, it's kind of higher floor, lower ceiling potentially, but at this point, I think Sweat's sort of achieved the floor, if you will.
Right.
Whereas Chase Young, I mean, he's beaten the floor, is what I'm trying to say. I said it poorly. Chase Young, I don't know if he's beaten the floor yet.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I don't know if he's ever going to.
Yeah. And then you have the question when it comes to how they build a roster this season. We went through this. All the veteran backups are on a 1-year deal. I assume they're going to want to keep a couple of these rookies around just because they have financial stability with keeping them on the roster because of their contracts, all that kind of stuff. And you want to develop these guys because if Sweat and Young are gone or one of them's gone, you're going to want to have somebody else, at least who can fill in as a body. And you're going to want to develop these guys.
And I certainly think KJ Henry is that guy they're hoping that turns out to be what you're talking about.
Yeah, he has some upside, that's for sure.
Yes.
Played at Clemson, so big school already.
And they moved up for him too in that round, didn't they?
I think they did, yeah.
Yeah, they moved up in the round to grab him. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, all likelihood they're going to keep 4 of these guys, right?
Defense probably, yeah. I mean,
so
yeah.
What do you guys think? Who would you keep? Let's just assume Sweat and Young are off, and they're
well, there's no question that James Smith-Williams is going to make it.
Okay.
Right.
I think those 3 are locks. And so if you got to keep one more, I mean, KJ Henry's a lock, I think.
Okay.
I mean, 5th round pick, they traded up for him. They're not going to
Yeah.
put him on the practice squad, so there's your lock right there. There's your 4.
Yeah, I agree.
If they keep 5, who would be the 5th guy?
I'd
probably
go
F.A. Obata.
Oh, I would probably go Obata too.
See, my one thing about Obata, and I think he's a good player, but he is 31 at this point. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're like, well, go with the guy who's a couple years younger.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, it's not an exact science. Possible.
No, it's not. Yeah. It's really not. And of course, they'll throw someone like Pryor on the practice squad.
Yeah.
And probably Andre Jones.
Oh yeah, Andre Jones is headed for the practice squad. Yeah.
Yeah. Those guys.
But I just think KJ Henry, if you trade up in round 5, you're not going to put a guy like that on the practice squad.
Yeah, exactly.
He probably wouldn't make it there anyways. He probably gets scopped up.
Yeah, there's no doubt he would. And he has a good reputation in college. And there's no doubt he would survive in the practice squad.
Yeah. All right, some national stories that we wanted to touch base on. Congratulations to Shannon Sharp. You are now no longer having to work with Skip Bayless. That's
success in life in and of itself.
Yes, that is a reward that everyone deserves. No one should have to work with Skip Bayless. Let's be honest.
Why does Skip Bayless have a job
to annoy people?
He is an equivalent to a shock jock on radio. Is all he is.
Yep.
He brings
That's exactly right.
Yep.
That is what he is.
He brings no substance practically in any sport he talks about. I mean, he's decent when he talks basketball, but then again, my knowledge of basketball isn't at anywhere where it used to be back in the 80s and 90s anyway, so I'm probably on par with him. And probably
But
just
you're
as
not on
stupid as
ESPN talking about it though.
Correct,
Or
right.
Fox or whatever network he's on now.
At Fox Sports 1.
Yeah.
And the worst part about it, because for as much as I love football, and I hear him talking about football, I lose more of my hair, which is probably why I'm bald. It's just ridiculous. It's just he brings no substance. He has no football IQ.
No.
I could go on all day about this guy and how horrible he is, and he's a fraud of a Cowboy fan too, because it was back in the early 2000s. He even made a tweet which I saved, and it was from his account. It says, "I am not a fan of the Cowboys. I just like their makeup." He posted that tweet, and I saved it.
You still have that?
Yes, I do. That's buried somewhere on my phone.
Put it out, you know.
Yeah, just for fun.
Well, if you go on my Twitter handle, I actually
you retweet it every once in a while.
Every once in a while, but I usually always retweet it right before week 1 every single year.
I don't like the guy either. I can't stand Skip. But of course, I've never watched any of those shows. You know, the daytime.
The bobblehead shows. You have a job, Steve.
I don't have time for that. I don't have time to watch TV. I don't know how anybody has time to watch TV in the middle of the day.
College kids. That's about it.
I guess so. I mean, whatever. To each your own. But I do not have time to keep up with that stuff.
Look, I called him before the show. He is Twitter incarnate. Like, he is the human version of everything evil and terrible with social media. Just attention seeking, spitting flame war BS.
Because like Twitter is a train wreck.
Yeah.
It's a total monster. That's why I'm not on anymore. I don't know if it's gotten any better now that Elon Musk has taken. Yeah, that's kind of what I figured, which is why I haven't come back. But I do think that's an apt comparison. It's like a bunch of total morons screaming about things they don't know anything about. Right. That is Skip Bayless. See, that's not a bad. That's not a bad example right there.
The last thing wanted to touch on, DeAndre Hopkins getting released by the Cardinals. Is he still the number 1 wide receiver in the league?
No.
Top 5, top 10? What would you put?
Top 7.
Yeah, I may put him in the top 5. I mean, he needs a better quarterback, better team.
Sure.
You know, but I mean, I don't know how you can't say like Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase aren't
understood,
like the top guys.
Yeah, there's a lot of very good receivers these days. Yeah. That's part of it. But the thing to me that's wild, how could the Cardinals not get like a trade for this? Like,
they just cut his ass.
Yeah.
Get out.
You couldn't get a couple late round picks, get something? You know?
Well, that's the one thing from what I've read is the Bills and the Chiefs were the teams that came the closest, but the only problem is they wanted the Cardinals to assume some of his salary, and they didn't want to take on all of it. And the whole point of them even releasing DeAndre Hopkins now before post June 1st, because they wanted to get all his salary off the books this year and get ready for next year. And just like how you had mentioned before the show, Alex, might be at a point where they kind of want to tank without tanking, even though they just got done re-signing Kyler Murray to this long-term deal. That I believe was like last year they did that, didn't they?
Yeah.
So I don't know how that's going to work in terms of, because
it won't work.
It won't work. So they're tanking to get a kind of pick to where they can trade back and accumulate more future assets, maybe, or something. I don't know.
Just by the way, that's what they're doing.
Yeah. Just so in case anybody doesn't understand this out there who's listening, what they're talking about is there's a difference between a pre-June 1 cut and a post-June 1 cut. Now, who did Washington just cut a while ago, the big name? Chase Roullier. They designated Chase Roullier as a post-June 1 cut. And what that means is that the dead cap money gets split up into 2 years. The Washington has a history of doing this. They've done it repeatedly. Who was the corner they cut?
Well, are you thinking like Josh Norman back in the day?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, Josh Norman. Washington has a history of doing this. But
I think a lot of teams do it pretty standard now.
Yeah, but I think the Cardinals are pretty smart in getting it over with and getting it done. You know, and he's gone.
They're also looking to move on from their linebacker Simmons, by the way. I mean, Like they're really trying to clean house.
Simmons was a guy who has an immense amount of talent, but he needed a specific type of coach to understand how to use him right, because he's kind of a bit of a freelancer, and you need to use his athleticism in the right way. And I always thought that he could be great if he was with the right team, and I don't think he was. And William Jackson is who I was thinking of. Jackson was
William Jackson. Okay.
Yeah.
Simmons and Davis similar in that regard. Like they have some raw talent, but you got to put them in the right spot.
Simmons had elite, amazing athleticism.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. He's a tier above. I'm not.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but
well, I think what he would actually fill is that role that Ron Rivera loves so much in that Buffalo nickel that they run anyways. He'd be perfect in that spot. He'd be on a tight end every game, and in that position he'd be able to rush. The scheme that Jack Del Rio runs is maybe not the perfect scheme for him, but near probably the
that
best.
Buffalo nickel guy, you would be perfect for Isaiah Simmons.
Yeah, that's a great point. Maybe they should sniff around.
Maybe they should
actually need a linebacker.
Maybe trade Chase Young out there for Isaiah Simmons.
I would make that.
Wouldn't that be ironic?
Yeah.
Hey, no kidding.
Yeah.
So Washington clearly won't sign DeAndre Hopkins to wrap that topic up. Obviously,
No.
receivers.
No, it's
but
just fascinating to me.
You just cut him with for nothing. Yeah, I don't.
And right now the
where
Bills
you put
and
him,
the
he's
Chiefs
still
are
a top receiver.
And right now the Bills and Chiefs seem to be the front runners as they're being reported so far. So
I don't know how the Chiefs can afford to buy a McDonald's cheeseburger, much less bring in an elite wide receiver.
Well, I mean, you know how these cap guys go. They find something.
I can figure it out. I know, but I mean they have hamstrung themselves with Patrick Mahomes' contract, man. It is brutal.
So the one thing that's wild to me is at the same time, this also really goes to show that this cartoonish salaries that some of these receivers get when they don't have a quarterback, it just doesn't make sense. Like for football team construction, like the economics of how do you build a team the right way? It never makes sense to do what they did. I hate to say it, Terry's contract would be in that list a little bit, not as bad as Hopkins was.
It's not nearly as onerous as some of those other contracts.
Yeah. Hopkins was almost $30 million a year or more, right? Something like that.
Yeah, well, I think it was the last one that they just got was like 2 years, $54 million. I think is what it was.
Yeah. So
I think Devontae Adams is like that 30 million mark, isn't he?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Oh, and they have no quarterback right now. That's amazing.
Hey, you don't like Garoppolo and his dead shoulder?
Hey, does Washington have a quarterback? Nobody knows.
No one knows, but
Jacoby Brissett. What are you talking about, Brissett?
I mean, he's okay. He's average. He's a quarterback. Yes, correct.
I saw a funny post. Someone posted a picture of the guy who's starting right now for the Raiders because obviously Garoppolo's hurt, and he said this guy looks like the guy you hired to play Carr in the movie about DeAndre Hopkins' career, because it looks like a low-rent Derek Carr. Like he just doesn't quite look right. Like he has a mustache, but it's not quite the same mustache.
Because we didn't have a budget to get a guy who looks a lot like him, so we hired him.
Exactly. Yeah. Just the Hopkins thing's wild. Anything else you guys want to talk about? We are right at an hour, so
I think we've successfully done yet another show.
We've successfully vamped for like a good while
because we're entering the dead zone.
A little bit.
Be aware.
A little bit of the dead zone.
Yep.
I'm gonna give us an applause emoji. There we go. We did it.
And next week maybe we could talk about the potential documentary about Dan Snyder and his ineptitude of owning the Washington Redskins.
I want to see, and I know we've covered it extensively already. I want to see the documentary about the whole Brian Davis thing. Like, whenever that subsides.
Well, what Dave is talking about is a joke he put in his column that I actually had to call him at like 10:30 at night last night, Wednesday night or Tuesday night to say, is there a documentary that I've missed here? Are you joking with this or what? Because it would be a perfect like Netflix special.
Yep.
The downfall of the Washington, Dan Snyder and the downfall of the Washington Redskins.
Yeah.
You could do the last year of this wholesale would be an epic documentary.
But the
Oh,
Brian
yes.
Davis movie needs to be the plot of an Indiana Jones film.
Yeah. It
You
would
can
still be
flash
better
back
than
to
Crystal Skull.
You flash back to 1945, and you have this Filipino guy crawling around the jungle
Yep.
looking for gold, and then you flash forward to an NFL corner sitting in an office. Oh
Right.
yeah, it'd be great.
Yes.
Well,
it would
see,
be
well, see,
fantastic.
actually, what you could do is when you have the Dan Slater documentary, you get to the end, and then that's where you transition into what they call the prequel, I guess, right? And then you talk about Brian Davis, and then you just close out the episode.
By the way, so the last time I heard from the woman who was doing the Sean Taylor documentary was like a year ago.
Yeah.
And I haven't checked in with her since, but the movie was still progressing. They were working on scripts, and she told me some things accidentally that she didn't want to get out, so I won't say them here. But that is still in the works. For those of you who remember, we had her on the show.
Yeah,
It
that
just
was
takes-
pre-pandemic that she was working on it.
Yeah,
So,
it just takes a couple years. It takes several years to get a movie from an idea stage to
yeah.
done. So, but
Especially
it's
if she's not like a big time Hollywood mogul, like you know.
no.
Yeah, it takes
And
a
so
long
it's for anybody out there wondering, that is still in the works.
Yep, not over yet.
No.
All right, guys, that wraps up this episode. We will talk to you all next week. Later.
Yes, we will. See ya.